The wind moved like breath between the trees, soft and restless, touching every leaf with fingers of ice. It was the kind of night that made the forest feel alive too alive. The sky above cracked open in flashes of pale lightning, each burst, followed by thunder that rolled across the hills like ancient drums. Rain poured in thick sheets, hammering the roof of a small wooden cabin hidden deep where no map dared mark inside. The fire burned low, just enough to push back the cold. The flames danced quietly in their stone cradle, casting long shadows on the walls. Beside it sat Daniel Dennell, a man of few words and fewer memories he allowed himself to visit. His hands were rough, lined with old scars and dusted with dirt. His face told a story no one had asked to hear, creases carved by war, by silence, by the weight of surviving too long after everyone else had stopped. He didn't need the world anymore. Didn't want it. His tools were sharpened. His shelves lined with dry herbs. His books smelled of mildew and peace. No signals reached this place. No visitors. That was the point. So when the knock came, soft at first, then again sharper, panicked, he froze. His mug of hot tea trembled in his hand. He set it down, the old wood table creaking beneath the weight of sudden alertness. Nobody should know where he was. No one had come in over 7 winters. He hadn't heard a voice not his own in nearly a decade. He reached slowly for the blade on the shelf. Not his rifle. Not yet. The blade felt more honest, more quiet. His bare feet moved across the old floorboards soundlessly. He stepped to the door, pressed a hand against it. Another knock. Softer, like the last strength was draining from the knuckles that made it. Daniel unlatched the door and opened it no more than a crack. She nearly fell through it. A figure tall, trembling, collapsed into the frame. Her skin was pale silver, glistening with rain. Long hair clung to her face like threads of starlight, soaked and tangled. Armor covered her chest and arms, cracked and bleeding lines of blue light. One hand clutched her side. Blood, if that was blood, dripped between her fingers, thick and glowing faintly. Daniel caught her before she hit the ground. She looked up at him through soaked lashes. Her eyes weren't human. Not even close. They glowed with a kind of softness he'd never seen, like moonlight wrapped in pain. And then, through lips cracked and trembling, she whispered, "They'll kill you too, if they find me." Her body went limp. Daniel stood there, holding something that was not of this earth. Her skin was cold, breath shallow, but alive. He stared out into the storm, then back down at the strange girl in his arms. He should have shut the door, walked away, let the forest erase her. Instead, he carried her inside. He laid her near the kindle fire, wrapped her in his only warm blanket, and sat beside her without saying a word. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the silence had been broken. The fire crackled quietly, casting soft gold across the cabin walls as rain continued to whisper against the roof. Daniel sat on the floor near the fire, his elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the girl who lay wrapped in his blanket. She hadn't stirred since collapsing in his arms. Her breathing was shallow but steady now. Whatever had bled from her side was no longer flowing freely, but the wound looked deep. The armor around it cracked like shattered glass. Daniel had seen wounds like that before on men blown apart by shrapnel, torn open by blast fire. But this was different. The blood wasn't red. It was darker, thicker, threaded with faint veins of glowing blue, not human. Not remotely. He wasn't sure what part disturbed him more, the inhuman biology or the unbearable fragility of her in this moment. He moved slowly, careful not to wake her, gathering what few herbs he had left, grinding them into a thick green paste. The smell filled the room, bitter, earthy, sharp. He'd used this mixture on himself more times than he could count. On deep cuts, on burns, on scars that never quite healed. She didn't flinch as he approached. Gently, Daniel peeled back what remained of her armor. It shifted like metal but felt like silk, warm to the touch and humming softly as if powered by something still alive. The wound underneath pulsed faintly, the skin around it luminous and smooth, save for the damage. He applied the paste and watched as her body tensed, just for a second, then relaxed again. "Not dead," he muttered under his breath. "Not yet." He stood and walked to the door. The storm had lessened, but clouds still churned above the treetops. Thunder echoed farther away now, like a retreating army. He scanned the darkness, saw nothing. Heard nothing, but he felt it, something was out. There, not a man. Not an animal, a presence. Watching. He shut the door and bolted it. When he turned back, her eyes were open. They glowed faintly in the dim light like silver coals catching fire. She didn't scream or panic. She simply stared at him, alert, studying. "You're safe," he said, his voice more gravel than words. She looked around slowly, her gaze landing on the bookshelves, the wood stove, the crude furniture, and then back to her side. She touched the wound lightly. Her fingertips came away, sticky with a herbal mixture. "You touched me," she said, her voice soft, accented in a way Daniel couldn't place, melodic but grounded. "You were bleeding to death. Most would have let me die." Daniel didn't respond. He sat back down near the fire, his hand unconsciously resting near the knife on his belt. "What's your name?" she asked. He hesitated, then answered, "Daniel." "Daniel Dennell," she said, as if the name meant something. "You were a soldier." He didn't ask how she knew. "And you?" He asked. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I am Varia, Princess of the House of Eltherin, of the Neuraland Imperia." Daniel blinked. None of those words meant anything to him, but princess he understood. "You're not safe here," he said. "I know," she replied. "They're hunting me." "Who?" Her eyes darkened, her lips tightened. "I refused the bond." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Bond? Not marriage, not how your kind knows it. It's genetic, irreversible. When a royal bloodline bonds, the partner receives everything: memory, power, lineage. I was meant to be given to a warlord, cruel, ancient. I refused. Now they want to take me, force the bond. Use me to command the fleets." Daniel stared into the fire. "They won't stop," she whispered, "until they find me, until they own me." Outside, a branch cracked in the distance. Faint but sharp. Both their eyes turned to the door. Daniel stood without a word and reached for his rifle this time. He checked the chamber, loaded 2 rounds, and locked eyes with her. "Can you move?" She nodded slowly. "Enough." He helped her to her feet. Her legs trembled but held. Her body shimmered faintly again, that same light underneath her skin pulsing. Like the beat of a hidden heart, they stepped to the window. Daniel moved the curtain just an inch. And froze. In the trees. Something moved, not walking. Gliding. A shadow without shape, tall and too smooth to be man or beast. It passed between trees without disturbing branches, without making a sound. Veer reached for his arm, her voice low and trembling now. "They've found me. How many? I don't know." Daniel's mind raced. He had traps out back. Old trails only he knew. Hidden routes through the forest. But if they had tracking tech, if they had her scent. "We run," he said. "They'll track us. Then we run faster." He grabbed a cloak, threw it over her shoulders, grabbed his pack and the bow from the wall, then unbolted the door. Rain still. Fell, softly now. The smell of smoke and soil filled the air. Together, they slipped into the dark, not alone anymore, and not unafraid. The forest swallowed them whole. Rain fell in whispers now, too light to mask their footsteps, but enough to leave the ground slick with mud and broken leaves. Daniel moved ahead. bow in one hand, pack slung across his shoulder, the other hand, steadying Varia as they pressed deeper into the woods. She was weaker than she let on. Each step was slow, deliberate. Her silver hair clung to her neck and her breath came in short, pained bursts. But she didn't ask to stop. Not once. The deeper they moved, the darker the world became. The trees here grew taller, their branches knitting together above like fingers in prayer, blotting out the moon. The undergrowth thinned, giving way to soft moss and ancient roots. Daniel knew this land. He had chosen this place years ago because no satellite or signal could pierce this green veil. He had built this forest into his fortress, one trap, one path, one secret at a time. But tonight, the forest was not his ally. It was holding its breath. A sound echoed behind them, low, mechanical, and pulsing. Not loud, but thick, like something humming just beneath the surface of reality. Daniel spun. Arrow drawn. Nothing. Vera turned her head slowly, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "They're close," she whispered. "How many?" "Not many, but enough." Then, "We move." He led her through a narrow deer trail, half choked with vines. The air smelled of wet bark and something else, ozone, like the sky was holding lightning in its lungs. Birds had gone silent. The usual rustle of nocturnal animals was absent. Daniel stopped by an old tree with a trunk split wide like a mouth. Inside, hidden beneath dirt and roots, was a box he hadn't touched in years. He dug fast. Metal scraped metal. The lock broke. Inside wire, snares, fire starter, old bone-tipped arrows, and an object wrapped in cloth. He didn't hesitate. He handed her the flask of water and started setting traps. "You prepared for this?" Varia asked quietly. "No," he said. "I prepared to be left alone." She watched his hands work. Precise, practiced, every motion purposeful. Her body trembled slightly. She didn't let it show, but the spark beneath her skin flickered low. He noticed. "You're fading," he said. "Using power to keep the tracker scrambled," she said. "They feel me when I don't." "How long can you hold it?" "An hour, maybe 2. Daniel nodded, then paused and asked without looking at her, "What happens if they bond with you?" Her silence lasted longer than the wind. "They don't just get access to my bloodline," she finally said. "They get my ancestors. My people pass. Memories through blood. War strategies, secrets, weapon schematics. If they bind me," she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "They'll control your entire empire," Daniel said. Vera nodded once, her voice thin. "And half the galaxy with it." He stood slowly, his jaw clenched. He had buried friends because of leaders like that. Had burned villages he never spoke of. Had watched men laugh while power turned their hands to cruelty. "You're not just a princess," he said. "You're a vault." "A vault with a pulse," she whispered. And then a sound cut through the forest, a shriek of metal and heat. Not from the earth, but from the sky. A red light blinked overhead. A drone. Daniel moved fast, grabbed a rock, threw it with precision. It struck the drone's eye. It crashed against a branch and dropped like a dead bird, but the damage was done. "They know," he said. Vera, a single quotes as body stiffened. Her hand reached out, tapping the edge of her armor. Glowing rings appeared in the air, flickering with symbols Daniel couldn't read. Her fingers moved through them, fast and urgent. "They're scanning." "Triangulating," she said. "We go deeper." They moved again, faster now. Varia stumbled once, and he caught her, held her upright. Her skin was cold. "I can keep going," she said. "You don't have to," he replied. "I do," she snapped. Then softer, "If they catch me, it won't just be me they destroy." Daniel led her to a narrow pass choked with thorns. A path he'd never dared take before. He carved the way through with his knife, the vines biting back with each step. Behind them, the forest began to shift. Branches moved without wind. Roots groaned. The hunters were coming. "They send seekers," she said. "Machines fused with flesh." "Relentless. I've met worse," Daniel muttered. "No," she whispered, "you haven't." They reached a small cliffside waterfall. Behind it, a cave dark, shallow, but defensible. They slipped inside, water soaking their boots, breath heavy and fast. Daniel lit a small fire. Not for warmth, but light. Faria collapsed near the back wall. Her hand shook, her eyes closed. The glow beneath her skin now barely visible. "I need rest," she said, voice brittle. 10 minutes. You'll have 15. Daniel stood at the mouth of the cave, staring out into the dripping forest. Then he heard it. Not footsteps, not machines. A voice. Clear, smooth, amplified. "Daniel Dennell, you are holding Imperial property. Release her. Walk away and live." Daniel said nothing. He turned to Varia. "How do they know my name?" She looked at him, guilt flickering in her eyes. "They're reading me," she said. "I'm sorry." "They see what I see." Daniel looked out again. The forest was no longer hiding them. The shadows were moving. "Then they're coming," he whispered. "Yes," she said. "And they won't ask twice." Daniel lifted his bow. "Good," he replied. "I don't like talking." The first arrow flew so fast it barely made a sound. It struck the seeker in the throat. A clean shot. Center mass, and the creature fell backward into the mud, limbs twitching, silver mask cracked. But Daniel didn't stop to admire his shot. He already had a second arrow drawn, eyes scanning the trees. Shadows moved between trunks. Quiet shapes. Too quiet. One down. More coming. The cave behind him burned with the small flame he'd lit earlier. Varia lay curled in its warmth, still too weak to stand for long, her skin dim with fading light. She had given him what strength she could, transferred something into him. A spark, she called it. And now it pulsed in his chest like a second heartbeat. He could feel the forest in his blood. He could feel them. They came in silence, cloaked in armor blacker than shadow, weapons glowing with faint pulses of energy. 6 figures moved like liquid through the trees, faster than humans, but heavier, like wolves wrapped in metal. Daniel didn't move. He exhaled once. Then he lit the first trap. A tripwire snapped behind a root, and a narrow wall of flame erupted between trees, catching one of the hunters mid-leap. It screamed not human, not animal, then collapsed, armor melting, fire licking the soil. Another moved left, flanking. Daniel loosed an arrow. It hit the shoulder, didn't stop the target. A second arrow, neck. The figure dropped. "Come on," he whispered. "I've got more." One emerged just feet from the cave's mouth. Too fast. Too close. Daniel turned to meet it. Ducked the first strike, a blade arcing toward his ribs, and shoved forward, slamming his shoulder into the thing's chest. They crashed to the ground together. Mud, leaves, breath and pain. Daniel drove, his knife upward, under the helmet, straight into where a throat might be. Something hissed, and the creature went still. He rolled off, panting, soaked with blood that wasn't his. Then Varia's voice cut through the dark. "Behind you." He turned too slow. Another attacker stood in the cave entrance, blade raised, glowing white. Varia was on her knees, hands lifted, light pouring from her palms. It struck the soldier mid-chest. A wave of pure energy, crackling with gold and blue. The attacker flew backward, hit a tree, and fell. Daniel stood again, bleeding now. Arms sliced open. Ribs bruised. 3 left. But he felt no fear. He felt alive. They came together, a triangle formation, silent, precise. Daniel moved first. He sprinted right, drawing fire. Two of them followed, their weapons firing beams of heat that scorched the bark behind him. He dove, rolled, came up behind a stump, fired again. One down. The last two turned toward him, just in time for Viria to rise, trembling, but glowing brighter than she had in hours. Enough, she whispered out, her hand stretched forward. A pulse. Of light, no, not just light memory. Power. Time itself seemed to bend. The hunters froze in place, as if something ancient had whispered their names. Then their armor cracked, split down the center. They fell. The forest one still again. Daniel lowered his bow. Viria lowered her hands and dropped to her knees, glow vanishing from her skin like the last breath of a dying star. He ran to her, caught her before she collapsed. I told you to rest, he muttered, breath ragged. I couldn't let them take you, she said, eyes fluttering closed. We're not done, he replied. They'll send more. She nodded weakly, eyes barely open. Then we move again. But first, you need to see something. He helped her sit beside the fire. She reached for the crystal at her neck, the one she had always kept hidden. It shimmered in her palm. She whispered something in her language, a name, maybe. A plea. The crystal glowed brighter. Suddenly, her body shifted. Not just glowing. Transforming. Her armor evaporated into golden threads. Her hair turned silver white, rising slightly like it floated in water. The markings along her skin came alive, symbols, letters Daniel could not read, moving like fire along her arms. Daniel stepped back, stunned. This is who I truly am, she said, her voice layered, echoing with something older, something divine. You're not just a princess, Daniel said. I'm the heir of the flame line, she replied. The keeper of the soul code, the one they've hunted for lifetimes. He stared at her, not in fear, not in awe, but in understanding. Because now he knew if they caught her, they wouldn't just win a war, they'd erase every free world left in the stars. And she had collapsed on his doorstep, crying. Daniel stood beside her again, not because of duty, not because of fate, but because in the stillness of her breaking, he'd remembered what it meant to be human. Outside, the trees rustled again. More were coming, but now they would find something waiting. Something stronger than soldiers, two souls who had nothing left to lose. The forest was burning behind them. Orange flames clawed at the trunks of trees that had stood for centuries, sending plumes of smoke into a sky that had once been untouched by war. Shadows moved within the fire, some writhing, some falling, some still coming. Daniel didn't look back. He carried Viria in his arms, her skin burning with fever, her body limp against his chest. Her transformation had taken more than just strength. It had drained something deeper. Her glow was dim again, her breath shallow. But her hand gripped his shirt. She was still fighting. They moved through the narrow escape tunnel carved years ago behind the cave, a slit in the stone he had once dug in silence, back when fear was his only companion and nightmares were louder than memory. Now that same escape had become their only chance. The tunnel twisted through the earth, tight and cold. Stone scraped against Daniel's shoulders. He couldn't use his bow, couldn't turn fast. He was vulnerable here, and he hated it. But he didn't stop. Viria whispered something, soft, a name maybe, or a prayer. We're almost there, Daniel said, even though he didn't know if they were. Finally, the tunnel opened. They stepped into a hidden valley carved by time, shrouded in mist and protected by cliffs that reached for the stars. A place so quiet it made your own breath feel like thunder. Daniel had only visited once, long ago, when he still believed in ghosts. Now, he wondered if he was becoming one. He set Viria down on a patch of moss and checked her pulse. Still there. Still strong. But her light, her power, was dangerously low. You need rest, he said. She shook her head, eyes half closed. They'll come. They'll always come, he answered. but they won't find us easy. He stood, scanning the cliffs. Calculating. Then he set to work. He didn't build traps this time. There were no tripwires, no flame bursts, no nets or spiked pits. This time, it would be them. The land. There will. Daniel placed her bow near her hand and kissed her forehead, not out of romance, but reverence. Like a knight to his queen before the final battle, he stepped to the center of the valley where the ground was clear. The mist coiled around him like breath held in fear. He could feel them coming. Not just a few soldiers now. Not seekers. Not drones. An army. And then he heard it. A hum that rattled his bones. A ship descended from above, black and sharp like a blade forged in shadow. It hovered in the sky, and from its hull, dozens of figures dropped like shards of metal rain. They landed silently. Faceless. Perfect. Deadly. They surrounded the valley with military precision. They didn't speak. Didn't raise weapons. They just waited. Then a final figure descended. Taller than the rest, cloaked in gold-lined armor. Symbols of the Neuralan Imperia etched across his chest like scars. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. Vera stood. Daniel turned in shock. You need to lie down. She shook her head. Her light was brighter now, not strong, but defiant. That is Kedric's, she said. The one they wanted me to bond with. Daniel looked back at the golden figure. Even from this distance, he could feel the gravity in the man's presence. Like standing before a black hole pretending to be a king. Kedrix raised a hand. His voice echoed across the valley. Child of Eltherin, daughter of the throne. You cannot escape what was written in your blood. Varia stepped forward. What was written is no longer truth. You dishonor your ancestors. You belong to us. I belong to no one. Kedrix tilted his head. Then you will die, and so will he. Daniel notched an arrow. Kedrix raised 2 fingers. The soldiers charged. Daniel moved like a ghost, silent, precise, filled with something that was not rage but clarity. Every motion had purpose. Every strike was a refusal. He fought with the land, with memory, with promise. Vera stood behind him, her palms glowing with fire and light. She sent blasts into the ranks, pushing them back, shattering lines, but there were too many. Daniel was struck shoulder, then leg. He dropped to a knee, breathing hard. Kedrix stepped forward. He walked calmly. Arrogantly. He raised his hand. Varia turned to Daniel, her eyes glowing, but her voice trembling. If he touches me now, he'll complete the bond. Daniel grabbed her hand. Then burn everything, he said. She screamed, a sound not of pain, but power. Her body exploded with light. It wasn't just brightness. It was memory, truth, history. The air warped. Time fractured. Soldiers were thrown backward like leaves in a hurricane. Kedrix was forced to step back, but it wasn't enough. He lifted a dark rod from his side, ancient, glowing red. I will take you, he growled. Before he could strike, another voice filled the air. No, you won't. From above, another ship descended marked with the emblem of the Alliance. Not Nor-Elan. Not Empire. But peace. Warriors stepped out. Diplomats. People of law. This girl is under protection of the Alliance. This human is now shielded by our seal. Stand down. Kedrix hissed. But he paused. The law held even monsters in place, if only barely. This isn't over, he said. No, Varia replied. This is where it begins. He turned and vanished into the mist. The soldiers followed. The valley quieted. Vera collapsed. Daniel caught her. She smiled weakly. We lived. Barely. Enough, he looked around. The Alliance ship waited. The sky was opening above. He didn't want to leave the forest, but he couldn't let her go alone. Vera turned to the diplomats. This man, Daniel Dennell is now flamebound, protector of the House Eltherin. Daniel blinked. Double quotes. Wait, what does that mean? It means, she whispered, you don't get to disappear anymore. And somewhere in his chest, where silence used to live, something else finally took root. Purpose. The stars above them looked different now. They weren't brighter. They weren't closer. But to Daniel, they felt like something had shifted, like they had noticed him. For a man who had once built his life around being invisible, that change was more terrifying than any war he had fought. The Alliance ship carried them away from the valley, away from the smoldering forest, the broken cave, the body count still warm in the soil. Daniel sat beside Varia, his arm wrapped around her shoulder, her head resting lightly against his chest. She was weak again, not from wounds but from restraint. She hadn't unleashed her full power when Kedrix attacked, and Daniel knew why. If she did, there would be nothing left of him or anyone else in the blast. There was too much inside her now, too much locked behind her eyes, curled in her blood, humming in her bones. She was no longer just a fugitive princess. She was something ancient, something terrifying. And he had promised to stand beside her anyway. Where are they taking us? He asked quietly, his voice low against the buzz of the ship's systems. To the Citadel, she said. It's neutral space. They'll want testimony, proof, names. And Kedrix? She hesitated. He won't stop. He never does. Daniel nodded once. His fingers brushed the edge of her hand. It was cold again. He hated that. Then we don't stop either. The Citadel wasn't a station. It was a city. Suspended in orbit above a shattered moon, it spiraled with towers and banners, flashing in dozens of languages, governed by diplomats, soldiers, and relics of law older than any one empire. They landed under escort. Armed guards flanked them, not enemies, but not allies either. Men and women who had seen the galaxy break and rebuild more times than they cared to count. Daniel walked with Varia, silent, sharp-eyed, already calculating how many exits the corridor had, where the guard lines overlapped, which walls were thin enough to punch through if things went wrong. He wasn't paranoid. He was prepared. Verea wore a silver robe now, her armor removed but not forgotten. Even in simple clothing, she looked regal, terrifying, holy, like a being pulled from legend. They entered the council chamber, massive, circular, high dome with glowing constellations projected on the ceiling. 20 seats, each with a representative, human, alien, hybrid, some flesh, some cybernetic, all watching her with the kind of hunger that came not from appetite but from political opportunity. Daniel hated them on sight. A voice spoke. Princess Varia Eltherin, you've broken 12 treaties, defied a royal blood bond, and brought a warlord to the edge of Allied space. Do you deny this? Varia stepped forward, her voice steady. I do not deny the facts, but I reject the interpretation. Elaborate. The bond was not mutual. It was slavery disguised in ritual. I refused. I ran. And Daniel, this human helped me survive. Eyes turned to Daniel. He said nothing. Didn't need to. His silence was louder than any defense. And what do you propose we do now? Another counselor asked. You are a living weapon, Varia. And he, your protector, carries your spark. You've started something larger than yourself. I propose, Varia said, that we finish it. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Daniel finally spoke, his voice cut like a knife. You want peace? Good. But don't expect her to buy it with her blood. Not again. One of the counselors, a hunched man with pale skin and 6 eyes, leaned forward. You are no one, human. A ghost from a war forgotten. What gives you the right to speak of galactic peace? Daniel stepped forward. Because I buried enough soldiers to know what war really costs. And if you let Kedrix bond with her, you won't have peace. You'll have extinction. The kind that doesn't stop at borders. The kind that eats sons. Silence. Varia stared at him. In that moment, something inside her shifted. She had seen men speak for her before. Generals, envoys, nobles who used her name like a blade. But Daniel spoke as if her life mattered more than victory, and that changed everything. A vote was called, slow, deliberate. Every representative cast a decision on whether she would be protected or returned to her pursuers. The results flickered on a massive screen. Deadlocked. 10 for her, 10 against, and then an override. A new voice echoed from behind a hidden wall. The tie is broken. Everyone turned. A woman stepped forward, face obscured, robed in blue firelight. I am the arbiter of the flame, she said, and I invoke the trial of sanctuary. Varia's breath caught. Daniel's hand instinctively reached for hers. What's the trial? He asked. A test, she whispered. A death sentence, if we fail. Then we don't fail. The arbiter stepped into the center of the chamber. The accused and her protector will descend. To Verid Hollow, no weapons. No ships, no backup. If you survive 3 rotations, your sanctuary will be honored. The Alliance will protect you. And if we don't? Daniel asked. Then Kedrix may claim what remains. Varia looked at Daniel. You don't have to do this. He stared at her, eyes unreadable. You knocked on my door, remember? Yes. Then I'm not closing it now. She smiled, tired, fierce. The chamber sealed around them. Outside, the stars kept watching. But for the first time, Daniel didn't feel alone under their light. The descent to Verid Hollow began in silence. No engines. No control. Only a drop pod, a coffin with seats that hurtled through the black, spinning through void, wrapped in ancient protocol and the whispers of history. Daniel sat across from Varia, knees barely touching, his fingers clenched on the metal edge of his seat. No weapons, no armor. Nothing but what they carried inside themselves. The hollow waited below a forgotten moon, once rich with life, now twisted by storms, radiation, and creatures that fed on warmth and movement. The Alliance called it neutral. Daniel knew the truth. It was a proving ground. For the desperate, for the doomed. Vera reached across the pod, her fingers finding his. If we die down there, she whispered, our story ends in the dark. He shook his head. Then we carry fire into it. The pod hit the atmosphere. The sky screamed around them. They landed hard on cracked stone and sulfur mist. The hatch blew off with a hiss. Air burned the skin. The ground pulsed faintly with heat and tremors. Towering cliffs surrounded the basin like jaws. Daniel helped her out, their boots crunching against the earth. The sky above was violet, churned with electric clouds. This moon had once been a garden. Now it was a place the galaxy sent people. It didn't want to kill directly. We need shelter, he said. They moved quickly, climbing over broken ridges and twisted growths. The terrain was unfamiliar, but instinct guided him toward higher ground, toward shadows with cover, not eyes. They found a shallow cave barely big enough for 2. It smelled of old bones and dry rot. Daniel checked the entrance for tracks. Something large had nested here once. Not recently. They had 2.5 days. 70-2 hours, if they lived. They walked away free. But Daniel knew something others DIDN single quotes T.KAEDRIX wouldn't wait. He would come early, on the second day. They heard the sound, not footsteps, not breathing. Frequency low and pulsing, designed to hurt, to disorient. Daniel gritted his teeth. He's here. Varia's face hardened. The marks on her arms glowed faintly. She hadn't used her power since they landed, saving it, guarding it. How did he arrive so fast? She asked. He didn't follow protocol, Daniel muttered. He never does. They moved out of the cave, keeping low through the shattered terrain. Lightning streaked across the sky, touching the cliffs like it was searching for blood. Then they saw him. Kaedrix. Not cloaked. Not armored like before. But raw. He had shed his ceremonial gear. Now his body pulsed with cybernetic enhancements, veins of red light running down his arms, eyes glowing with predatory hunger. You've run long enough, he called, voice-like. Gravel rapped in command. I offer you mercy. Your mercy is conquest, Varia said. And your defiance is betrayal. Daniel stepped between them. You want her? He growled. You'll have to walk over my corpse. That was always the plan, Kedrix replied. He moved first faster than Daniel expected. A blur of metal and hate. Daniel dodged barely and swung with a broken branch. It cracked against Kedrix's side. No effect. Kedrix's hand struck Daniel in the chest, sending him flying into a jagged rock. Pain. White hot. Ribs snapped. But Daniel stood again. You can't win this. Kedrix snarled. Daniel didn't answer. He ran straight at him. This time, not dodging. He tackled Kedrix, driving both of them over the ridge, tumbling, rolling, fists and elbows and teeth. Blood sprayed. Metal cracked. The earth split under their struggle. Vera followed. Her hands lifted. Kaedrix turned, eyes flashing. You won't harm me. You need me alive for the trial to count. Varia stopped. Trembled. Daniel stood again, barely, face covered in dirt and blood. No, he said. We don't need you alive. We just need to survive. He looked to Varia. Do it. Her eyes glowed. Not blue. Not gold. White. The light of memory. Of power. Of generations. She stepped forward, lifted her palms. Kaedrix. Backed away for the first time. You wouldn't. She whispered a single word. Nur el ice. Command in the ancient tongue. The light exploded from her. Not destruction. Transformation. It stripped Kedrix of his power, unbinding the bond code. He screamed as his enhancements flickered and died. His limbs spasmed, eyes rolled back. He dropped to the ground like a puppet with strings. Severe. Alive. But broken. Vera collapsed beside Daniel. He caught her again. The sky above cleared, just slightly. One star visible through the storm. You did it, he said. We did, she whispered. You kept your promise. Wasn't just for you, he said. I know. The Alliance ship returned the next morning. They stood together, bloodied, bruised, alive. The Council greeted them on the landing ramp. Expressions unreadable. The Arbiter stepped forward. The trial is concluded, she said. The Alliance will honor its word. What about him? Daniel asked, nodding toward the bound form of Kedrix. He broke protocol. He will be judged. Daniel didn't care. Not anymore. He looked at Varia. What now? He asked. She smiled faintly. Now we choose. Choose what? Who we become. Months later, stories began to spread across trade routes, through resistance networks, in whispered circles of those who still dreamed of justice. Stories of a human who stood against an empire. Of a princess who refused to be a weapon. Of two people who lit a fire in the dark. They called her the Flameburn. They called him the Silent Vow. And they were never seen in the same place twice. But wherever oppression rose, someone knocked. And the stars remembered.